Alright.
Hey guys, welcome to another weekly episode. So today I got special guest OPT who'll go over, some of the flow for the charts I'm showing you. Hi OPT.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Yours?
Yeah, pretty good. Got a couple of games. Ferrari lost today though, so I'm kind of mad about that. But Golden State gave a nice trashing to Memphis.
I did see that.
All right. So anyway, I was working over the weekend on some charts, right? And I was charting SPY and I've actually, noticed that we actually broke a really, really long channel. Like this is all the way from June 20th all the way to December 31st, which is about one and a half, almost 2 years. So generally when something breaks such a long channel, we actually, tend to have a massive sell-off. So I feel like, this chart kind of aligns with the fact that we could, continue selling off to like I'd say 375. And looks like, this the 12 million put that came for 388. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, these came through Friday, as you can see the timestamp at 10 a.m. Through 10:30. Just really, really bearish, obviously. I mean, you put 12 million on an above the ass sweeper into June SPY puts. You could say that's a hedge, sure, but that just really caught my eye. And then the ones that followed it, obviously, really got me thinking. And like your chart shows, we've got that gap fill right there. And then I've showed you some of my charts that I've been looking at, and we're right near some pivotal pivot points for the quarter and the year. So it's not looking great right now for the SPY.
Also, something I noticed was, when they kind of came in was when, the market kind of had that, interday bounce, you could say, right?
Right.
So would you say that they were kind of marking the bottom?
Yeah, you could look that they were. I mean, you mean I would say maybe not marking a bottom, but maybe marking more of like that, showing that this reversal wasn't going to last long. That the bullishness, the reversal we got, isn't the real bottom. It's not reversing in. I still think there's more to go. I just think they waited for an opportune time for the price to get a little better, and when it did, they came in heavy and they came in fast.
Yeah, I agree. And also we can see that, where we paused, right? Below that, we know that there's a gap to fill at like 400, 399, right? So there is that, obvious $4 or $5 gap that's been, wanting to get filled for almost like a year now. So that does seem like an ideal spot. But, this strike and our charts are forecasting more of a downside to 375. So I think next week with CPI will be really interesting. What are your, kind of your expectations for CPI?
I'm expected to come in hot like it has been. Maybe not as hot. You've heard a lot of people saying, "Are we peaking?" That doesn't mean that it won't tick up some. I just don't know if we're going to get as big of a reading. And then I think we've got Fed speakers every day for like the first 3 or 4 days of the week. So that should also make for a lot of entertainment.
Yeah, for sure. And alternatively, right, I did, draw an alternative because a lot of people, I put up a poll and 70% said we would play out the downside, right? So when does the majority ever been right? So just for giggles, I kind of drew an alternative where you could, right? You can see that we have a channel here where we go top to bottom, and the top of this channel is about, 438, 440, which I thought it's kind of interesting if you actually, pumped, squishing all those puts, that $11 million puts. And, the algo kind of seems interesting, right? It does seem like it's been buying well. The market's kind of been selling. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the algo definitely has been interesting. The top left is the 1 minute, which is the better for like intraday trading. And while it does, show more sideways movement and consolidation there, it really was a sideways and down movement a little bit, and it's plain below the moving averages. And then on the larger 15-minute scale one, yes, there's clearly some divergence between the price and the algos right there. However, if you do look at it, I mean, it's not trending well when it gets above the moving average, and that's where you're seeing the SPY rebound recently. Even though they both have a little bit of a curve up, the one that it has a much greater intensity on it than the 15-minute does, they don't give me a lot of hope and strength in them. I will be watching to see if the 15 can break the moving average, but even if it has recently, it hasn't been strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the fact that, that generally we've seen these algos, not play out a million times. So I don't think we should, kind of give it a lot of importance. And something else to also see is that, if we were to draw a channel that joins, the top and end points, we can see that, the bottom touch of the channel would be around, 387, 385, which is like, I'd say, that aligns really well with the put. So I don't know. I'm getting kind of freaked out that, the Elliot waves and, the floor are a little bit too aligned.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Sometimes it does feel a little odd when, every chart, every algo, every flow you see, and you're like, all right, this is too good to be true.
But we also saw that retail bought 2.6 billion, in kind of net flow last week. So I don't really think everyone's aligned. I just feel like people who can see the obvious kind of see what's coming.
Yeah, but you and I both seen, I think as many people have, when you see that kind of buying by retail, that's not necessarily who you want to be buying. Not anything against the retail, but we need the big money there to hold us up. So that doesn't give me a ton of hope either, but still interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, also something important to monitor is obviously Apple, right? Because we know where Apple goes, the market kind of follows. And we know Apple, I feel like that's the most important chart to be watching next week, because we know that, Apple is kind of in this channel. And if I zoom out, you can see this is honestly a weekly chart that I've charted in, where the top of this channel was kind of, you can see that it's hit the top of it, right? If I zoom in, we've hit the top of it many times, gone sideways, gone sideways. So it's just a matter of days or weeks till if I zoom in a little more, you can see there's an orange trend line which is kind of holding a support, and you can see the weekly pretty much closed on it. So I feel like if Apple were to break below like 153, that would kind of give us our clue that the market is breaking apart. And which is why I thought Apple was an important chart to kind of look at, because we pretty much, you can see that we dipped below it, right? And we've yet to close below this channel because it's been bought up every time by the algo. So let's just say the futures gap down. I feel like, our bear thesis of 380, 375 would kind of come into the picture. So what do you think about Apple? I actually had some dark pool here. Give me a second so I can pull it up. What did you think of the prints that, we kind of had on the dark pool?
I thought they were interesting. There was nothing super crazy there in the sense of just given the amount of liquidity and shares of Apple that are traded. The part that kind of gets me a little nervous about it is a lot of those prints, you can kind of see starting to act as resistance. Yes, there were minor pops above them when they were printing for sure. I can't deny that. But when you see kind of a lot of those start to come in, they're acting as resistance. I don't have a lot of faith in Apple, and I'm not a big fan of the Apple chart right now. I mean, not saying it can't have a little bounce, but I don't see a lot of strength when I see Apple right now.
Yeah, so alternatively, right, just not to be biased, I did draw this bull version, right? Same as SPY, where we'd go retest 173, but bigger picture, we know that it tried to break out of a channel, had a fake breakout, another fake breakout. So wherever Apple bounces, it's going to come back to at least, the low 140s, 135. So this is kind of the alternate to, the bear chart. Like if you don't break down and the algos actually, kind of buys up, we could have like a pretty nice bounce next week before we actually have a larger move to the downside. All right, moving on, right? Let's go to Tesla, everyone's favorite meme stock, right? So I noticed that these 915s were posted like a few days back, and I feel like they were posted when Tesla was about, I don't know, let's say 940, 930 maybe.
The spot price is right there. They were bought they were in the money when they were bought.
Oh, my bad. I completely forgot that. But 860s. All right, so it's not too far, right? Like I feel like that's a pretty, like bearish looking flow. And we can see that Tesla, like bigger picture, right? We made a high on 29th of October. We've just kind of been going sideways. And every time it's tried to break above, there's been a trend line that's been acting as resistance. And if you were to look at the smaller time frame on Tesla, we know that it's kind of in a bearish flag sideways, which is acting as support and resistance, which means that, at minimum, it's bound to retest 788. So do you think this flows kind of bearish leaning for a touch to the bottom?
Definitely. I mean, I've seen a lot of this Tesla flow come in. Tesla has a lot of flow coming every day. You can ask anyone who watches flow, and Tesla's all over the place. I will say, as of recent, I'll say maybe the past couple months, when I've seen flow like this come in, you might remember a few months ago or a month ago, we had some pretty big calls come in when Tesla was down right before it rebounded, and we played those in the group, and they worked out. So this is definitely flow for me that I think is pretty bearish, and it's something I'm going to potentially follow.
Yeah, but alternatively, you posted some pretty bull flow here too, right? The 8:30 calls. There were a couple of them on the bid, and I saw a couple more. Give me a second. Let me pull it up for you. Yeah, these, like, I feel like these are a lot more bullish than bearish, right?
Yeah, I think those are definitely, leaning some bullishness on them. For sure, it definitely could work out, especially. But again, if we want to notice the one thing, they're both in the money. No one's betting, no one's placing a big bet unless they're in the money on Tesla right now. Those are about 10 to 20, even 30, 40 bucks in the money, depending on where they bought them. And the other ones were about the same. So it doesn't give me a whole lot of warm and fuzzies that Tesla's not going to either be range bound or stuck, and one side's going to win out on this. But the other 513s below, while those could be bullish, I think those could be a little bearish right there because of the bid side flow, and they all came in so close. Little hard to tell on those. I'm not 100% confident, but yeah, I would say the Tesla's going to be in that 830 to 915 maybe range for a moment.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And I remember last time it was like 945s when Tesla was about like low, like mid 700s, early 800s, right? So I felt like that flow was a lot more indicative of where it was moving. All right, so this is both the bear version for Tesla, and obviously the bull is we have a short-term bounce and we kind of get rejected near, 1,988-ish. So yeah, we could alternatively, kind of look at, some of the bigger caps like Google, right? We know for a fact that, Google's been selling off ever since it made an all-time high, right? At like 3,000, and then it tried to bounce, rejected near resistance, and again, been going down and had awful earnings, right? And you pointed out that there's a lot of, call selling on Google at the, for 619. So how do you rank this flow?
So this flow was tricky. The one thing that made me lean bearish on it was the very last one, the below bid sweep, right before close, end of day, getting in there. Could you make an argument it's a closing order from one of the earlier strikes? Absolutely, it could. I don't think that's how these were being traded though, given the price and that they were blocked, so they were sitting and waiting. So I do think that this was some call selling. Collecting that premium, which, as you kind of mentioned, kind of makes sense. That's kind of safe right now with the way the market's been trending with those bounces, those intraday bounces before the sell-off are the inverse of that. So it's a good strategy, and I'm pretty bearish on those. And then obviously the other flow for the 513s, that is bearish. That's to me opening puts all day long.
Yeah, for sure. And it was only like, they opened at $20 higher. So I doubt they were, putting behind so much money just for like a $10 move to the downside. So that would kind of be indicative of, a gap down. And I feel like it's a lot more evident on Google and Amazon, for example, compared to like some of the more bullish flow on, Tesla and Apple. These are, kind of getting hit hard, as you can see here. Amazon.
Yeah, that, and then we had the XLY that complemented those as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, here, let me pull up the XLY flow. Yeah, these, right? The 2.18 million for 150.
Correct.
Yeah, for Amazon, for example, right? We know this chart was kind of troubled because this was obviously a triangle, right? It was kind of going sideways. It was either going to break out and move higher, but we can see that it had, firm sell-off. And we did have, kind of that, counter trend bounce where, trap more bears, trap more bulls. So I feel like, this rejection all the way at 3,400 was kind of the sign that Amazon was going to have a massive move to the downside. So again, we know when such a bearish, chart pattern breaks, there's bound to be more sell-off. So I do think that these, 2050 puts, like, they're out of the money. So I feel like this is kind of like that Tesla play where they're really smashing out of the money puts.
No, I agree. I wish I would have seen a little bit more value behind them. Would have been nice to see a million,
Mhm.
value sweep. But I like this flow. I think I'm aligned. The flow and the charts align pretty well together. Maybe that's
Yeah.
confirmation bias, but I think it's a good sign.
Yeah, alternatively, just to avoid our confirmation bias, I kind of want to show you this chart, right? If I actually, put a channel here, you can see that this is the top channel, which is going sideways, bottom channel. So although we are below it, which can, kind of, give value to the fact that we probably just sell off, we could always get brought up, and try to retest, some of this top end before we move lower. So, just to keep our bias in control, I put this chart up. But honestly, I'd say this is supporting bears because we have, broken below it, and you would need a bullish Monday to kind of save Amazon that way. All right, we've done Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Microsoft. We've not done the softy, Microsoft. So again, Microsoft, I have two situations, same as Apple, right? And we know that Microsoft has just kind of been bearish, right? We were in a downtrend, we tried to break out of the channel, we retested it, we are holding, right? It had that earnings dip. So Microsoft, same as the market, likely in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, versus alternatively, right? Since we had this massive, I'd say, this down candle to 260 on earnings, it could just be a ghost week, right? We could just, have that C wave bounce, kind of throw everyone over before we move downwards. Have you seen any kind of flow on Microsoft that would support either of these charts?
No, Microsoft hasn't been getting hit much that I've seen on the flow. Um, Anything that gets me really excited about it. It might be just because Microsoft is one of those stocks that's owned by just a lot of the bigger names, and they just kind of they hold it since it's a dividend play as well. But I'm not seeing anything that would give me any indication directionally.
Yeah. All right, we can move on to your favorite IWM ETF because I know you've been smashing puts left, right, and center on this, given all the bearish flow that's been coming in, and charts are very supportive of this bearish move because you can see that we are in this kind of megaphone pattern, up, down, up, down, up, down, and we did kind of move in a bear flag from Jan 22nd all the way to April, so about 4 months before we broke down, try to retest, and now we're failing. So I do feel like this is a pretty good pattern to retest the low, 165s. And, look at this flow, OPT. Like, I feel like, you love this kind of flow. Like, what are your thoughts on IWM?
So yeah, the flow got me a little nervous on the first one when it was a below bid sweep, just because that could be seen as put writing, and I'm open to that as an argument for it. The thing that kind of changed my mind on it was we could see that price continued down, and they continued to come in. These were all purchased, within a few minutes of each other, maybe about a minute, minute and a half, something like that. And I'm leaning bearish on these, especially then when you see the other side of the 179s for 520. Again, those kind of a little bit of the inverse of what we were looking at over on the 178. But those are also, I'm leaning bearish on those. So I just think IWM it's one that kind of makes sense. We all know it's been getting beat up a lot recently. It traded sideways for most of last year. And we were sharing charts earlier today, and there's quite a few gaps on IWM that don't necessarily have to get filled, but we know most gaps get filled. So just doesn't look great for IWM right now.
Yeah, especially since, like you said, it's traded sideways and this flag, right? And we almost want to retest it before we fail. So generally, such a breakdown retest generally leads to a lot more downside, as you mentioned. And since you kind of brought up gaps, there's definitely one that I see here at about, I'd say 165. I'd say there's a gap to fill here, and that would kind of align with the bottom of this channel. So I feel like 165 is kind of a good target to kind of have on IWM. But alternatively, how I feel about bias. So I will show you a full chart, which you might hate or you might like, right? Depending on that. But if IWM or the market were to have a bounce, I'd say IWM and most growth stocks are likely to have the more aggressive bounce, because you can see here I have it, almost going like 20-30 bucks higher to retest it before we go lower. And you want to kind of talk about the algos that might kind of support this move, because they tend to look really bullish, kind of moving upwards.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, both the algos on the 1 minute and the 15 minute, I mean, there's definitely some clear divergence there from the price action. Algos are the, purple and white lines, and the price actions are the blue bars. Definitely both look very similar on that cross up on the 1 minute and the 15 minute as well, in the sense of where they're going right above touching the moving average. So there could potentially very well be a good bounce here. Pardon me. The only thing that I will say doesn't give me too much hope, again, is if I don't think I have it on the, oh, I do have it on the screenshot. The only thing that doesn't give me a lot of hope is you can see it's got some pretty, dark pool prints, which are the dotted yellow and orange lines, and live pool prints to break through. And I don't see, and you could see it's failed once, twice, 3, 4 times, 5 times there now. I don't have a lot of hope that it's gonna be able to break through all of that. That's a lot to get through.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just to see the other side, we looked at it, right? But I'd say probably 195 is kind of the level it looks like to, kind of break over if he wants to, kind of follow through and any of these algo bullish divergence.
I would agree with that.
All right, we can move on to, QQQ, which is everyone's favorite tech, which is getting murdered right now. And again, same as SPY, there's like a lot of, intense value behind these puts on QQQ. And we know that this was, again, the downward channel QQQ's been in, it broke out of, and then it failed, right? And we had the FOMC bounce again. We rejected previous resistance, the top of that channel, and boom, we've come lower. So again, my chart does align with the fact that, they're kind of betting on a massive, look at these A's, man. I thought this was pretty bearish.
Oh yeah, very bearish. They bought a lot of time. So, not saying necessarily they're going to hold if there's a big bounce, but they did buy some time there for protection. And then you see over there that there's some July ones that were purchased basically at the money. They started purchasing those at 307.50, purchased some more at 309. So, this definitely looks, just bearish flow to me. I don't, you can make an argument that the December ones are a hedge potentially, given that there's quite a bit of blocks in there, but, and that they're the fact that they're in the money as well. But it just doesn't look great. That's a lot of money to just put on some of these as well for the market not to continue to have some downside momentum to it.
What about the fact that, it's deep in the money, like 333? So like, why do you think that, they kind of went so deep? Is it because they're so far out, they wanted more delta for their value?
The deep in the money is what makes me think these could just be potentially hedges, just again to protect against their portfolio. They might be tech heavy, and this is their way to counteract that. But it's also the fact that they are deep in the money right there, but the quickness of these all came in. It doesn't give me a lot of confidence that these aren't real bets placed against a downside move and not just protection.
All right, got it. Alternatively, right, we do have, similar to IWM, SPY, we could have like a counter trend bounce to, go, it didn't really fill this gap. So there is a gap to fill at 349, 350. And the algos don't look too hot for QQQ though. SPY, IWM, and even the Dow had divergence, but Qs don't look so great.
No, the Qs don't look great at all. I mean, even on the 1 minute time frame, they curled down right at the end of the day, and it definitely was a down into the right day for the algos. Maybe a little bit of a morning pop or sideways action. On the 15 minute, yes, there was some divergence for a moment. You can see that's definitely changed. And ever since it's been trading below the moving average, price action has not been strong on it. So algos and the flow does not give a lot of hope for the bulls on the Qs.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you. I feel like we had a really productive conversation, in regards to some of the bigger stock, the indexes. So why don't we go through, some of this week's weekly watch list and kind of, go over our thoughts. So the first one I actually had was Facebook. I know Facebook did have a massive bounce, off of this bottom trend line, but if I were to, draw a channel that kind of went like this, you can see support, resistance, support, resistance. So I am, kind of leaning towards the fact that Facebook does, again, if you go to the daily time frame, Facebook does, have a gap to fill, bill to like 180. So I feel like, risk to reward, these puts here look pretty good for downside. So what's kind of your thought? I see a bunch of Bs on this floor. Do you think they're just closing their puts, or Are they buying more?
So I don't think they're closing their puts, just given the fact that the purple for the service for black box indicates that it's above open interest on the day. So I don't think those are closing. There is a chance that those could be put writing. However, when you look at the price action of these, the spot price, you can see the spot price was, kind of bouncing around a little bit, moving up, moving down. So there could be some credence to why those appeared on the bid side. But I would say when I look at these, while it's not necessarily slow, I would say I'm going to follow it because the flow is super strong. When I look at this flow and I align it with just the overall chart of Facebook, and I look at the spot price action and the way that the IV was kind of flat until the very end, I'm leaning.
Right. So alternatively, right, if we were, kind of leaning bullish, I do kind of have bullish chart just in case, because I know this 24/6, they kind of came in for June 200 puts, right? They could kind of be laying in a floor here because I see one of the ask, one of the bids. So were they closing both their contracts or were they kind of buying more? Because I do have an alternate bull chart, right? Just in case the market bounces, right, and catches everyone off guard. I do think, Facebook could, try to attempt to fill some of the gap overhead at 260s. So what do you think about this? Do they just close their A's?
So yeah, I thought about that. It could be that. I doubt it though, just because these were 14 seconds apart. And the IV did move down, as you can see, from 54 to 53. And as we know, as the IV of the option changes, that'll impact the price. So even though the second one's a B, I'm kind of reading the tea leaves there, seeing that spot price stayed the same, 204.03. The only thing that changed was IV. And if we look at the price difference between them, the 13.355 and the 13.3, I'm leaning that just because of that IV move, it was a price adjustment. And they just got in there, and that's really an ask. It just because of that movement, it changed. So I'm leaning that those are actually bearish and could drag the Facebook a little lower. Contract size is a little small because there's only 400, 200 a piece. So it's definitely one I'm going to be waiting for Monday morning to see the open interest, and then also watching flow to see if more of that one comes in. It's got my eye.
Yeah, I feel like if Facebook were to break like 199, it would be a direct hit to like 180, right? So I feel like a lot of them would be smashed when the break kind of happens, as opposed to, people, overrunning it.
I agree with that.
All right, that was our first play for the watch list. The next one is your favorite oil, which you love so much and I hate so much, but it is. We can see that it was, kind of in this triangle, went sideways for like 2 months, and now it's broken out and kind of had an inside day. So as long as I feel like oil holds about 80.4, it's going to have a really bullish move. But, you kind of told me flow is a bit meh, and it kind of is meh. Why is that? Shouldn't more people come in, or are they just scared the market could bring down oil? What's kind of going on?
So I think it's a few things. I think it could definitely the market. I think there's a little bit of hesitancy about the demand side of the coin for oil. But I'll also say, while USO has definitely been a big favorite of a lot of people, and there's definitely a lot of flow on there and money that can go into it, I've noticed there's been not as much action on it ever since oil had its big negative year, and then they kept having to reverse split USO and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed it seems to be there's a lot more money people are hiding out in XLE, XOP, and like Oxy, especially with Warren Buffett buying it. But yeah, the flow came in. It's not nothing super exciting, nothing really above open interest or anything. But I'm in agreement with you. I do think oil has some more upside. I will say though, the price of oil is getting interesting though too, especially when you hear the price of diesel is just skyrocketing, and as we know, diesel runs a lot of the shipping around the world.
Yeah, agreed. And in regards to shipping, I have USO calls as well as ZIM calls, which is actually shipping this thing. So what are your thoughts? I know, again, Shanghai is under lockdown for 40 days and, the war is still ongoing. Putin might do something tomorrow when, it's a national, some kind of day in Russia. So what do you think about ZIM? Like, I know these are out of the money, but they're low in value, but so ZIM there's kind of two ways to that, right? Either this is a counter trend bounce, which rejects a 66, right, or 71, or this is a wave 5, right, which is probably going higher. Again, we know this is the channel it's going to hit. So I'd say to at least 108. So what are your thoughts? Do you think Zim can actually head higher to 108?
Yeah, it's funny. This is the flow that we grabbed to kind of show because there just wasn't a lot of Zim flow to kind of go over. These are interesting, especially just because they're also fairly cheap, 85, 95 bucks a contract. Values are low, but I agree with you. Everything you said about the shipping and just the global logistics and supply chain right now is just a mess. There was actually an October 100 plus strike for Zim. I don't remember off the top of my head. It did catch my eye. I was like, wow, that's super far. Good workout, I guess. But there wasn't enough behind it to warrant kind of digging more into it. But yeah, I mean, Zim's an interesting one that, I think, like you said, let's see if it can get past that 71.92 level, before doing anything really with it.
Yeah, I agree, because we know that this could just be a retest with goes really low. So, that would kind of be bad if it can't get back over that channel. All right, so those are kind of my two bullish plays for the market. The other bullish play I had was Walmart, which I actually, think even with the market, I feel like Walmart could, go higher, have that fifth wave to the upside, right? Just one more wave before it's done. But again, I am giving it a very tight stop. It has to hold like 148, 147 if it really wants to, kind of move higher like this. So what are your thoughts on Walmart? I see a lot of bids. So are they selling the 145s for next week?
Yeah, it actually does look like they're collecting some premium. They're selling these two blocks in a sweep, 105, 106 grand a piece, obviously. There's blocks though, so there's not necessarily a lot of confidence in the trade. So they sat around and waited for their blocks to get filled on those. But as you can see, what I found was interesting was, stock price moved down. Obviously, so the strike, so the premium, sorry, the price of the strike should also move down as the stock price moved down since these are calls. But IV increased, and they kept coming back, and they came back later in the afternoon. Not a whole lot of faith in these, just because again, it's only $300,000 on Walmart for next week. But it is something where if Walmart looks like it's going to continue to break down, this would be the ones I'd probably follow personally.
Yeah. Alternatively, you can see that if I, kind of flip the top of this to the, bottom of that wave, we've kind of, been rejecting the 1.23 fibs. So this entire wave was your wave 8, right? Wave B, even though it made a new high, it's just an expanded flat. They do happen, right, when they kind of have these impulsive moves, and we've come down for this wave C. So if we do, right, even though I am bullish, but if it breaks 147, I'd say Walmart is a pretty good short to the low 130s. So I think bull or bear, Walmart does offer a lot of this thing, and it does actually have earnings on May 13th. So I feel like we're kind of going to find out soon enough whether Walmart is bullish or bearish. So yeah, I am bullish on Walmart, but again, I don't rule out the bear case at all. So with that, I want to move on to the next play that I had, which is actually McDonald's, right? And the reason for that, we can see that McDonald's has kind of been in this sideways channel, right? We broke down, we retested, and we know every time something retests and fails, it's going to have a massive sell-off. I know you said it didn't have a lot of flow, but what do you think about McDonald's? Do you think it's a good short?
I mean, yeah, especially I think a lot of those international sort of food chain or food companies like McDonald's are pretty decent short. I mean, Europe's not doing great right now. Obviously, they were impacted by closing all the McDonald's in Russia, et cetera, et cetera. There's concerns about a potential recession. We had a negative GDP print here recently. So, I mean, yeah, McDonald's definitely could seem like a good short. It's as you know, it's a boomer stock, so it's going to move with a little bit of a turtle speed to it there. But I definitely could see McDonald's having some downward movement there.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like they've been, right, stuff like McDonald's, Costco, they've been run up too much and they kind of lag the broader sell-off. So, they can kind of catch up to the rest of the market that way. All right, the next one I actually have is Square, which didn't really have a great earnings. It was fine, right? Bigger picture, we know that, Square is in this channel, right? If I go to like a weekly time frame, you can see it a little more, better. You can see this is the top of the channel, this is the bottom of the channel. Again, we broke out of it. We had a massive year. Again, the COVID crash touched the bottom of it. We broke out of it, had a massive year. And now you can see that we're actually, if I did this, you can see we're kind of holding the bottom of the channel. But however, if I go to the 4-hour chart, it could, kind of lend, credence to the bear thing, because you can see we were bought up once, earnings got bought up twice, but end of day Friday, we actually closed below the channel. So I am thinking, Square can make a really nice short to the low 76, especially if the market, faces a lot of downside. So what are kind of your thoughts on this? Do you think like it could happen? I know the puts are a little mad, but they are leaning more bearish.
Yeah, it puts a little mad, flows a little mad just in general for Square Block. It is definitely, I would say, leaning a little bit bearish. I would say the one thing that gives me, I guess, confidence that that Square Block could have more downside is the flow that we were talking about with coin. Both move a lot with the way Bitcoin moves. Yes, I understand Block has other products that aren't related to Bitcoin and so on and so forth, but it does seem to have a pretty heavy movement in correlation to that. So I would say, based on the fact that Bitcoin's down, coin had some decent size print or flow put against it. And again, this flow is technically, I would say leaning bearish. Doesn't give me a lot, again, hope for Block right now either.
Yeah, agreed. And alternatively, I did draw a bull case, which I don't know. I don't really think it's going to happen, but if Square really does play this out, it does, kind of have room to retest the 180s, which is almost 100% move. And I do see a few calls on here, but again, I barely think this is going to play out. I feel like Monday would kind of tell us, as you mentioned, right? Like Bitcoin is down. So we'll kind of know whether, if it does, like I said, hold the bottom of this channel, it could, kind of be due for a bounce. Let's not say 180, but I'd say at least 114. So I feel like bull or bear, like if you're bullish, wait for a break of, I'd say, okay, first you can wait for a break of 98. You can trade it to 106, right? If it breaks 106, then I feel like you have room to like 125. If it breaks 125, then it's probably going to 180. But again, not a lot of faith in that. As you said, I am leaning more towards the fact that we likely, have that flush downwards to the low 70s with Bitcoin. And as you mentioned, coin rate, end of day, Friday, you posted this $90 out of the money puts for like June, and they're going to gap down massively because, we know that Bitcoin is down. How much? It's selling off more. It's down like almost 4%, right? And generally,
I just pulled up futures real quick, just so you know, and Dow's down 0.5%, S&P's down 0.6, Nasdaq's down 0.7, and small caps are down 0.8, almost a whole percent. So, and VIX is up 1.23%. So it's not looking great. I get it's only 6:34, so futures just open, but yeah, futures look horrible.
Awesome, OPT. I think our puts are going to print. But I'm not going to get too cocky because we know the alternative is kind of a violent bounce that could ruin a lot of bears. But just I just wanted to transition to Bitcoin real quick before we move on to coin. We can see that, the reason Bitcoin is selling off, like it shouldn't be a surprise, right? Anyone who does TA, we know this is the channel it was holding. The minute it broke and consolidated, boom. So I feel like the next area of support where, Bitcoin can kind of find some balance is around 28, 29K, right? Before it can have some, if they were feeling a little more meme, they could push it to 23, 24 before it actually has a bounce. But bigger picture for Bitcoin, I am kind of expecting a wave, the fifth wave and A wave could kind of end there, have a B wave bounce before we move down for a C wave. And if I go to the weekly chart, right, you guys can see that this is kind of the channel which is acting as support and resistance, and that's the reason, Bitcoin kind of sold off from the area. So if you are kind of looking long term on Bitcoin, I am thinking that, at minimum that it would retest the bottom of this, which is like 15K. If it wants to, go more, it certainly has room to, go to 8, 9K, kind of have that capitulating bottom sell. So I know this is a pretty bearish OPT, but do you think Bitcoin could come to these prices?
I don't know. I want to see Bitcoin break the 21 first, because that's the mid 20s, I should say. That's an important level. There's some rumors that at 21,000 is when MicroStrategies gets margin called. I've seen other people say that the way that their loans are set up, they won't get margin called on the way that they have this set up and everything. So I don't want to say I can't see it. I'm more curious, can we break the mid 20s before I start talking Bitcoin 8,000 again? Because I think that would just, I think that would really put a big impediment, obviously, on crypto, the legislations, the ETFs, all of that. I think it would be a big problem.
Yeah, which I think is going to happen because, people are, the liquidity and the way people are trading and the margins that they're using, I just feel like all of that is going to lead to a catastrophic event, which is kind of impending. I just feel like it's just impending doom, and Elliot Wave is just kind of telling you ahead of time that it's going to happen. When it happens, people just be like, oh, it's because this news happened. I was just like, yeah, because the waves kind of told you news was going to happen. But anyway, that's for another day. I just wanted to go over Bitcoin Bitcoin real quick. And again, yeah, these people definitely knew that. I mean, I'm sure they saw the chart of Bitcoin and it was consolidating below, so it could have been a TA move, or they knew something and they could have bid it. But this was a great flow to follow for sure. Did you kind of get in on this flow, or were you waiting to see if coin would follow through to the downside?
I was waiting to see. I was gonna potentially get in on Monday. Monday might maybe be too late with the way futures and Bitcoin are looking right now. I was just looking at the top was what, 427, and now we're talking about coin potentially dropping below 90, based on what the flow is showing here. I mean, that's just an incredible fall.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly thought, it had a kind of a falling wedge pattern, and I thought it would hold, but bam, it bounced for like a day, and you could see like it just boom, it fell. So this should have kind of been my sign that it would probably come down to like the low 80s. But yeah, you're right, I missed on this one too. This would have been a great flow to follow. So yeah, that's what we had for coin. And yeah, I went through Square, Walmart, McDonald's, USO, Zim. Oh, DVAC. How can we forget about Trump? So again, I've been bearish on DVAC since the hundreds. Like it broke this wedge, and ever since then it's just bouncing. And you can see again, remember where we rejected on the ES? DVAC is kind of pulling something similar where we had a rejection on the previous wave 4, right? And we're moving lower. So any bounce on DVAC, right? Is this a bearish call? Can I assume that?
I think it's bearish. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So any bounce, you can either sell calls because of the IV, you can buy puts, but DVAC in 2023 going to give up all his gains, bro. Going to settle in the low 10s, probably below that. But yeah, I'm pretty bearish on DVAC. I think it's a pretty good swing rather than, a weekly trade. But yeah, this is what I have for DVAC. Go to hell, Trump.
And you can see they kind of bought a little bit of a swing pay there with buying 520 or selling, I should say, 520 calls on that. So yeah, I haven't played DWAC. I've seen the flow come in on it, so I've kind of been able to see some of these potential moves here. But yeah, this one is definitely interesting. The only thing that gets me about it is, again, just the price of these. 17.20 a piece. I think there's better plays, at least for my capital, but good luck if you're going to play it.
Yeah, and the last but not the least, I had UPST. I know it has earnings this week, but I see a lot of BPs, so they're definitely selling 130 calls for, I'd say, May, kind of capitalizing on that IV. So what do you think about this chart? For me personally, we broke this massive channel that was holding a support on UPST. Then we broke this megaphone, retested, failed, and now we're kind of failing to get over those moving averages. So I do think UPST could sell off in earnings, probably have a sideways bounce and then move down lower. But ultimately, I feel like into May and June, I do think that UPST could see like 60s and 50s. So yeah, bearish calls, bearish chart. So what do you think? Bad earnings?
Yeah, I think the earnings aren't going to be super great. I mean, given what they do, Upstart, all those the different ways of doing loans and everything. The flow is interesting for sure because it's definitely bearish. The only thing that doesn't get me super excited is they are $50 in the money. But like you pointed out, the IV was really high. The IV is 183, 186. So they could be playing for that IV crush because since they sold these, they got to buy them back. What better way to buy them back than to just have an absolutely horrible earnings, fall off the face of the earth, and buy them back for hopefully a penny or two.
Even if it doesn't have a horrible earnings, right, it's definitely going to have an IV crush because, expected moves probably over 20%, right? So these guys are probably going to make money. I feel like it's a very safe bet what they've done.
Wow, look at that, 409.90, 409.6.
Yeah, but it's kind of still holding this area. So I tell you, the bear chart has a high probability of playing out if we break, 4069. Like that's kind of the area you're kind of looking for. Otherwise, right, if I had to wave this, we can definitely still do something like this OPT. So we can't get our hopes too high till this bottom breaks. When this bottom breaks, then it's, you know, bear dance, bear city, everything. Till then, we
I don't
can't
like
rule
that
this
line
out.
you just drew.
I don't like this either. I like this much better, but I can't rule it out because I know, like, I have been with them plenty of times where I've gotten crushed by these bounces. So I've learned to play it both ways and not let my bias through. But yeah, this can definitely, again, something else I wanted to show you is, you know, even if it's bearish, right? Again, if it breaks 4068, then we're directly headed down, right? But alternatively, it could just, you know, kind of have that overnight bounce to, I'd say, 4185 before we have a boom 345. So those are kind of the two bullish alternatives if the low doesn't break. But yeah, ideally, we want to break this before open, and then bam, we're going to have a massive flush.
Well, yeah, you and I were talking about it earlier today. Most of the indicators that I see on futures, SPY, SPX, you know, whichever you're looking at, they're negative. The only thing that gives me a little nervous for a bounce is the RSIs on some of the bigger time frames do look like you could have a potential bounce in there. But again, with all the other indicators looking strong.
Yeah, agreed for sure. Yeah. Also, I think it's on trendline support from like, I don't know, like the COVID, you know, trend line. I don't have it drawn, but
Yep.
if you do a trend line, we're kind of sitting on there. But again, break 406 and you're golden, buddy. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, OPT. We should definitely do this again. And thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks for having me and happy trading next week.
You too, buddy.